Hey guys, Coach Adam talking to you from TeamElitePhysique.com today with another Bikini TV. Today we are going to be going over the evolution of Bikini Olympia champions, going into a little bit of the history, what's changed over the last 8 years in Bikini, and let's go ahead and jump right into it. So I wanted to jump back into memory lane and look at Bikini since 2015. It's a perfect round number. It's 8 competitors, so you can see what's happened over the last 8 years in terms of the development, in terms of the conditioning. Has it gotten significantly more muscular? Has it gotten significantly leaner? Is the pathway for it to go to the next level even more and more muscular? Does it look like figure did back then now? Let's go ahead and look at it, and let's start right ahead from the backside because that's the most obvious point. So all the way back, we're going to go into, so this is 2015. Ashley, this is where she won her 3rd Olympia. We have Courtney King in 2016, Angelica doing the repeat champion, and we're going to look at the evolution between all the athletes going all the way up to the current champion, Maureen. So the best way to compare to see the biggest difference is going to obviously be from the current year to the farthest year back, and you could see the one thing I want to keep you guys to keep an eye on is the evolution of the tie-in. Okay, so in 2015 we saw a very little bit of a tie-in. There was not a significant tie-in. When Courtney King won, it was a totally different pose, and there was almost no tie-in when Courtney King won. Ashley has a little bit of a tie-in, so there's a hint of a tie-in there, no significant tie-in. When we look at Angelica, when she won, that's when you really started seeing the outside edges of the tie-in being a little deeper, but it wasn't what we call now a complete tie-in. So looking at Angelica in the next year, she even had even more of a tie-in, right? It's not complete or etched in yet, but has the edges of the tie-in, which is what I always talk about. You want to have those edges of the tie-in in without any deep detail in the hamstring, and I think that she is doing a good job of that. I think that is a great look for Bikini. I think that that's a good stopping point for Bikini there, with that tie-in being there without it being etched in, completely shredded, and having some good detail in the hamstring, some good roundness without any separation. And Angelica was always that competitor where people would always you'd hear about it online. People would say things like, you know, I don't know why she's the champion. She doesn't stand out in any way or anything like that. And I'm like, that's why she's so good, is because she doesn't stand out in any specific way. You don't look at her and say, oh, her glutes are so big. Like, you look at some competitors now and you're like, oh, she's got the best glutes. I want to have glutes like that. Well, that's cool for Instagram, but that's not the sport. That's not the balance of Bikini. You want to be good from everywhere and not great from anywhere. That's always what I say. So if your glutes are overpowering and it looks cool on Instagram, not going to look good on stage when you get in front of top level judges. And that's the thing people didn't understand about Bikini. But her balance was spot on. The conditioning was spot on. You could see the tie-ins are there, but they're not etched in. And so that was confusing to a lot of people who didn't understand the sport, but I saw it every time on why she would get the go-ahead on that. Then the next year you got to Issa. Issa pushed the level of conditioning a whole nother notch. Issa was the first Bikini athlete that you'd see in her Instagram and stuff, kind of doing that thing where you kind of like pull the skin, where you pull the skin, it was like elastic, it's like plasticky almost, where you're pulling the skin because you're so lean. There's just no fat there, so you could do that thing with their skin. She was the first one that would get that tight. Her waistline was so crazy, it changed things quite a bit for Bikini. So when you look at her waistline here, it is itty bitty. There is barely a waistline there. She's got a really small waistline. So there's a couple things that happened during the Issa era that still stick around to today, and it seems to be that's kind of the case. As soon as the tie-ins started showing up with Angelica, they kind of became a thing. They kind of were something that was desired by athletes, right? So the tie-ins came in, they're like, okay, we like tie-ins, let's go ahead and keep that as the baseline. We want tie-ins, right? Years prior, now Ashley has great tie-ins now, but they didn't want them back then in 2015, so she didn't have them. She didn't develop them. Courtney, same thing. They didn't want them, so she didn't have them. So when Angelica started showing the signs of a tie-in, people were saying, oh, that's a lot, that's a lot. And that was where, you always run into this, oh, that's too much, or oh, that's a lot, that type of thing. But it became a thing and it stuck around. And then when Issa won, from the front, she changed things. So Angelica changed things from the back a little bit. Issa changed things from the front. You see here, her lat is open, and she was the first one to really open a lat up on a Bikini competitor. You never heard anything about lats in bikini. That was never a thing. I never once got feedback at that point saying, oh, hey, your athlete needs more lats. And now I hear it all the time. But until that year, no one ever said anything about the lats. Actually, to give you some insight, Ashley didn't even train her lats in bikini until the Issa era, where they wanted lats to be a thing, right? That was not even something we trained. When Phoebe started working with me, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, at that time it wasn't a thing. I actually told her, let's stop training your lats because your lats insert low on your back, so we're not going to train them because it makes your waistline a little wider, because your lats on your lower back, if it's getting thicker, your waistline's going to get thicker because it attaches so low on you. So it was like something we purposely weren't doing. That and chest, it was just shoulders, arms, glutes, legs, and even then quads weren't really a thing even then either. We wanted some tone to them, but you didn't want any overpowering quads. Some of the things that happened with Angelica was the quads got a little bit bigger. They definitely got a little bigger with Jennifer. But looking at Issa, that's when the lat thing changed, right? The lats were like, okay, that's desirable. But the thing about Issa, she didn't have the tie-ins, right? So the next year, the Olympia champion changed. And enter the Olympia Championships, Janet Leaug. I was super happy when Janet won because she had so many second places at the Olympia. She's such a sweet person that I was like, man, she's so deserving of getting that Olympia Championship at this point. I think she probably has the most second places as an Olympia in bikini ever. I think she does. I think she holds that record. Now, with Janet, she left no stone unturned, and that's the very first time you saw an Olympia champion with a full tie-in. So that's a full etched tie-in all the way. I wouldn't call it fully etched, but it's a full tie-in. It's very close to being etched. Not etched, but it's a full tie-in. You can see the full bottom. You see the difference of the full tie-in, where that bottom part is on the bottom part is showing. You see that deep finalizing V. That's the difference of a full tie-in and a almost tie-in. So let's go ahead and look at the difference here of the edges of the tie-in. So the edges of the tie-in, when we look at Angelica here, you could see here on Angelica's, you see how she has the V, but there's not a complete tie-in. You're not seeing that full complete V here. That's the differences of conditioning. Now, the difference of conditioning to get from that level of conditioning of leanness all the way to this deep V conditioning level of V, the V here, is quite a bit more dieting. Janet is significantly leaner than Angelica to get that deep V in that last bit on that tie-in to show up, on that, for that body fat to go. A lot more dieting required to get there. So it pushes the level of conditioning. So if you see the evolution on how it works, you go from no tie-ins, a little bit softer conditioning, to Courtney staying right along the lines of Ashley. There's not much changed in that year from Ashley to Courtney. And then the next year you see Angelica with the tie-in starting to show up. That looks really good. Angelica pushes the tie-ins a little bit the following year, getting them a little bit deeper, but still not etched in. Then the next year, Issa wins not because her tie-ins are so great. She has some decent tie-ins. They're not complete. They're not like anywhere near Angelica's or anywhere near Janet's, but she pushes the level of conditioning. So she changes it from the front. So Issa changes it from the front, bringing in a conditioning that's completely crazy. We've never seen in bikini before, just absolutely peeled. But still, I will say she's peeled, but she has that pretty muscle. It's still pretty. It's not super dense, even though she comes in super tight. Tiny, tiny waistline, great lat width. That's something that was never a thing before. So now we have all these things that we're adding up. We have the tie-in started, right? Then we have the conditioning started. Then we have the lat width started. Then we have Janet putting everything together. She has the conditioning that's on another level, right? She's matching Issa's conditioning with Angelica's tie-in. So she's bringing a whole new level of tie-in, right? Then the next year, enter the scene, Jennifer Dory wins the Olympia with a completely different structure than we've ever seen win the Olympia before. More of a medium build than a petite build. You see Janet, Issa is a petite build. Ashley, Courtney, a very petite build for Courtney. Angelica would be in that like small medium build, right in the middle. And then Jennifer goes into that first girl who has the medium build with fully developed quads. Her quads are what you would call like thicker, more developed quads, right? Conditioning on Jennifer is a little bit less though than Janet and Issa, more similar to the Angelica era, which I'm a fan of that level of conditioning. I think it's super obtainable. I think it's that health and fitness, what we're trying to shoot for, that model look conditioning that's going to be on that beach model conditioning. And then looking at Jennifer from the back, she brings a whole nother level of muscle on the back. So thicker, more muscular legs, right? She's got a deep tie-in, not a etched tie-in, but you're starting to see the abductors now come in, right? The adductors were not a thing prior to that, so you're seeing this kind of the more deeper groove in the adductors now. You're seeing the deeper groove in the adductors here with Janet. You're not seeing it with Issa in years prior. So this is how a sport evolves. So look at the adductors now on Ashley, Courtney, Angelica, you're not seeing any signs of a deep V. And that's something that the judges look for. They say they don't want a deep V, right? So look at the adductors on all of them and that definition here. And then look at the adductors in the last few years, especially since Janet, right? You're seeing those adductors a little bit, right? Now, Maureen, I think, has good adductors. She doesn't, they're nice and they're not a deep V, but the level of conditioning has gotten to a different point. The level of muscle has gotten to a different point. So it's gonna be harder to not have that deep V now because the level of conditioning and the level of muscle. Now, how do you get tie-ins from Ashley and Courtney to Jennifer, right? Is it just conditioning? Well, I don't think Jennifer's conditioning is much greater than Angelica's conditioning here. So how do you get tie-ins and muscle, or how do you get tie-ins like this? It is by building muscle, okay? So it's by two things. It's conditioning and a lot more muscle. To get tie-ins, guys, you're gonna need a lot more muscle. So yes, the amount of muscle now is significantly greater than the amount of muscle then. You know, the difference is, so to give you an example of how much muscle has been added, Ashley is coming in on stage now about 123 when she was winning the Olympia, somewhere in the 117 range. So she's 5 pounds heavier, but the difference is she's significantly leaner because she has to get the tie-in to show up. So she's significantly leaner. So let's say, we don't know for sure the numbers, but let's say she's 4 pounds leaner of body fat, right? But she's 5 pounds heavier weight. That's a 9-pound swing of skeletal muscle from now in 2023 to 2015, right? And only 8 years, or 8 years since her last one, right? So that's a pretty big difference in terms of actual skeletal tissue. That's a lot of muscle for someone who weighs 120 pounds, 10 pounds, and we're talking 10% almost, right? 12 pounds would be 10% on someone who's 120. So that's a lot bigger of a person, 10% bigger basically. So that's basically the difference here. And when you see Maureen basically takes the entire evolution and puts it all together. I do like her level of conditioning. I think it's on the level of Angelica's conditioning. I don't think it's on the level of Issa's conditioning. So that's one thing I've been very happy about, is the level of conditioning, I think, is back to where I think it should be. I think the level of conditioning is where it should be. It should be hard. It shouldn't be easy. It should be hard to get there. But this also is the beach model, fitness model division, right? So it's not supposed to be shredded, you know, shredded potatoes like Issa was when she won, right? So they've done a good job at toning that back, or when Janet won, completely shredded, right? They've done a good job at toning that back, but the muscle is a lot higher than it was in 2015. Because you're not going to get that tie-in, you're not going to get that full upper edge rounding, and that's another thing we can look at closely on the glutes, is the upper edge rounding. So if you look at Jennifer and you look at Maureen, and you look at this upper edge, right? The main thing that the judges want is, they said they don't want any squaring of the glutes anymore, right? They don't want any squaring of the glutes, but they are pushing it. They're getting close to that level of squaring the glutes where that roundness is now coming out. So what does squaring the glutes actually mean? Well, let's go ahead and look back at a Courtney King when she won, and her upper edge, right? You see how the upper edge is just a natural upper edge to the glutes. It's just like a natural rounding of the glute, versus you look at the current fullness of the glutes as the standard, and it is a lot fuller, a lot more harder of an edge, right? Now, is this squared edges? Is this not squared edges? This is basically where you'd have to make that decision for yourself. It's pretty hard to get your glutes really full without getting a little bit of squaring of the glutes. This is a really full, really round glute, a lot more density than there was before. There's no way to get that much density without, or that level of conditioning, that level of roundness, without getting more density. So, it's a lot more muscle. I'm looking at her from the front. Really nice round shoulders. There is some capping to the shoulder. That is something that is part of bikini now. You could see it really start with the capping like in Janet's when Janet won. The level of conditioning really did require her to have capping. You pretty much can't have, you can't not have capping of the shoulders when you're that lean and you have muscle, right? So you're seeing the shoulder rounding, the shoulder capping, you're seeing the shoulder capping here, and that's just been something that's been consistent for a few years now, but that has been an evolution as well. Now, the thing about Maureen, she's got really, really good flow. I love the prettiness of her muscle. She's got we call pretty muscle. It's round, it's flowy, it's not super dense, it's good balance with her physique, but yeah, it is a lot of muscle. You know, it is, there's no way around it. It is a lot of muscle. So looking at bikini and looking at the trends of bikini this year with how they've been picking the winners with being lean, dense, round, full, is there going to be an evolution again this year in bikini? I don't know. We'll see. They're either going to be an evolution in bikini, it's going to go another level of muscle, or they're going to recalibrate the division and pick someone back and bring it down just a little bit back somewhere in the middle of these. But it is undeniable the division has gotten more muscular, the division has gotten leaner. I wanted to go over today and how each time it's happened, it does kind of stick around and become kind of a standard. That's kind of how things work, right? Something changes and then it becomes normal. And then something changes and then it becomes normal. And now that's like, you have to have that or you can't even be competitive type of thing, right? So that is the evolution of bikini on the Olympia champions. What do you think? Am I missing anything with the Olympia champions that has evolved that I haven't seen or pointed out here? Obviously posing. But is there anything else I missed in terms of muscles? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you learned a thing or two.